They humiliated me in front of 60 people and expected an apology. They had no idea with who they were dealing with. Watch for the complete story.
My name is Gerald Whitfield. I spent 17 years building a quiet, decent life in Charlotte, North Carolina. I worked hard, paid my taxes, coached Little League on weekends, and loved my wife Sandra with everything I had. I was the kind of man who held doors open for strangers and said grace before dinner. But let me tell you something my grandfather used to say. Even the calmest river will flood if you keep filling it. The family reunion was Sandra's idea. Her family did it every summer, a big sprawling cookout at her parents' property out in Concord, about 30 minutes from our house. 50, sometimes 60 people. Cousins from Georgia, aunts from Virginia, uncles who smelled like cigarettes and opinions. I never loved it, but I went every single year without complaint because Sandra loved it and because I loved Sandra. At least I loved who I thought Sandra was. Her brother Derek never liked me. That was no secret. From the first Thanksgiving I attended after Sandra and I got engaged, Derek had this way of looking at me like I was a piece of furniture that didn't match the room. He was the type of man who confused loudness for strength and cruelty for humor. At every reunion, he'd find some small way to poke at me. A comment about my job, a jab about my car, a snide little remark delivered with a grin so that if I ever reacted, I'd be the one who couldn't take a joke. I had absorbed it for years. Every single year. This particular Saturday afternoon, I was seated at one of the long folding tables, minding my own business, eating a plate of food, and having a decent conversation with Sandra's elderly uncle about college football. Derek walked past me carrying a massive bowl of spaghetti he'd just pulled off the stove inside the house. He was bringing it out to the buffet table. As he passed behind me, he tripped. I will put that word in quotation marks and leave it there for you to interpret. A wave of scalding hot spaghetti poured directly over my head, my neck, my shoulders, and my back. The table went silent. I stood up slowly, pasta sliding off my shoulders, marinara sauce dripping down the side of my face. Derek was already grinning. Not apologizing, grinning. He said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "My bad, Gerald, didn't see you sitting there." Something snapped inside me. Not rage, exactly. More like a door I'd kept locked for years, swinging open on its own. I turned around, and before Derek could say another word, I grabbed him by the front of his shirt and put him flat on the ground with one clean, practiced motion. No punching, no brawling, just down. I'd wrestled in high school and college. It was over in 2 seconds. The entire reunion erupted. Sandra rushed over, not to check on me, still dripping with hot sauce, but to kneel beside Derek. Her mother started screaming. Cousins were pulling out phones. And within minutes, the family consensus had formed like a storm cloud. Gerald overreacted. Gerald needs to apologize. Derek was just clumsy. Gerald embarrassed everyone. Sandra pulled me aside near the tree line and grabbed my arm. Her eyes weren't worried. They were furious. "You need to go over there and apologize to my brother right now," she hissed, in front of everyone. I looked at her for a long moment. The spaghetti was drying on my collar. My back still stung from the heat. And my wife was asking me to apologize to the man who just humiliated me deliberately, in front of 60 people, and laughed about it. "No," I said. I walked to my car, opened the Uber app, and rode straight to Charlotte Douglas International Airport. While I sat in the terminal, I booked a one-way ticket to Honolulu, Hawaii on the next available flight. I had miles saved up, a valid passport in my bag because I always kept it there out of habit, and a credit card with room on it. Within 40 minutes of leaving that reunion, I was through security and sitting at a gate. My phone started going off like a fire alarm. 78 calls and texts in the first 5 minutes. Sandra, her mother, 3 different cousins. Derek himself, which stunned me. But I turned the phone face down on my knee and stared out at the tarmac. I needed to think. And somewhere between boarding that plane and the moment we lifted off over the Carolina clouds, something else started rising to the surface of my mind. Small things I'd dismissed. Late nights, Sandra explained away with ease. A name that appeared in her messages once. A name I didn't recognize but chose not to question. Mileage on her car that didn't add up. A credit card charge at a restaurant I'd never been invited to. By the time we crossed over the Mississippi River at 35,000 feet, I wasn't just angry about spaghetti anymore. I was starting to understand that the reunion wasn't where my real problem began. Hawaii is beautiful in a way that almost makes you angry when your life is falling apart. I checked into a small hotel in Waikiki, ordered room service, and sat on the balcony watching the Pacific Ocean roll in like it had no opinion about anything. I silenced my phone for the first 12 hours. When I finally turned the volume back on, I had 143 missed notifications. I scrolled through them without responding to a single one, but there was one text that stopped me cold. It was from Sandra's cousin Patrice, a woman I'd always respected for being straight with me when nobody else in that family would be. Her message was 4 sentences long, and it rearranged everything I thought I knew. Gerald, I debated whether to tell you this, but you deserve the truth. The man Sandra has been spending time with, his name is Brock. He was at the reunion today, standing near the back by the coolers. I read it 3 times, then I called Patrice. She answered on the first ring like she'd been waiting. She told me everything she knew, which was enough. Sandra had been seeing Brock, a man she worked with at the marketing firm downtown, for somewhere between 8 and 10 months. Patrice had seen them together at a shopping center in Mooresville back in February and confronted Sandra privately. Sandra had begged her not to say anything, promised it was already over. Patrice had given her the benefit of the doubt. Until today, when she saw Brock standing at the edges of our family reunion like he belonged there, watching Sandra with the kind of familiarity that couldn't be mistaken for anything innocent. I thanked Patrice. I hung up. I sat with the ocean in front of me and said nothing out loud for a very long time. I stayed in Hawaii for 6 days. I did not spend those days crying on the balcony. I went to the beach, I ate well, I slept. I thought with the kind of cold, deliberate clarity that only distance can give you. And I made decisions, quietly, carefully, the way I do everything that actually matters. On day 3, I called a locksmith back in Charlotte and had every lock in the house changed remotely through a service I'd used before for a rental property. I called my bank and separated our joint account, moving my portion into an individual account I'd opened years before Sandra and I married, an account she didn't know existed. I called a divorce attorney named Margaret Holloway, whom a colleague had once recommended, and scheduled a consultation for the day after I returned. I collected my thoughts the way a man collects evidence, quietly, without announcing what he's building. I flew home on a Tuesday morning. Sandra didn't know I was coming back that day. I'd let her believe I was still unreachable, still somewhere in the Pacific nursing wounded pride over a plate of spaghetti. The Uber dropped me at my house a little after 2 in the afternoon. I unlocked the front door with my new key, walked in, set my bag down, and went to the kitchen to make coffee. That's when I heard a car pull into the driveway. I looked through the front window, Sandra's white Accord, and behind it, a silver pickup truck I didn't recognize. She got out of her car, and so did he. A tall man in a polo shirt, carrying what appeared to be a bottle of wine. They were laughing about something as they walked toward my front door. My front door. The door to the house I'd bought, furnished, maintained, and paid the mortgage on for 11 years. I unlocked the door before Sandra could use her key, which no longer would have worked anyway, and opened it wide. The laughter stopped. Sandra's face drained of every color God ever gave it. Brock froze on the walkway like a man who suddenly understood that the ground beneath him was not as solid as he'd assumed. I looked at him first, calmly. "You have about 10 seconds to get back in that truck," I said. My voice was level, almost pleasant. "And I strongly suggest you use all 10 of them." He looked at Sandra. She said nothing. He got back in the truck, then I looked at my wife. Really looked at her. Maybe for the first time in years, without the filter of love softening everything I saw. She opened her mouth. I raised one hand. "Don't," I said. "Whatever you're about to say, Sandra, don't." I stepped aside and let her walk in, because it was still technically her house too, until the paperwork said otherwise. She walked past me and sat down at the kitchen table, and I sat across from her with my coffee. On the table between us, I placed a single manila envelope. Inside it were printed screenshots, text messages Patrice had forwarded me, a photo taken at that Mooresville shopping center, and the business card of Margaret Holloway, attorney at law, with my consultation date circled in red ink. Sandra stared at the envelope for a long time without touching it. "Gerald," she started. "I'm not angry anymore," I told her, and I meant it. I was angry at the reunion. I was angry on the plane, but I'm not angry right now. Right now, I'm just finished. She cried. I let her cry without filling the silence with comfort I no longer had to give. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. I kept the house. Sandra didn't contest it. I think somewhere inside her, she understood she had no ground left to stand on. Derek never got his apology. He never will. I still go to the beach sometimes, though now I go to Wrightsville instead of flying to Hawaii. I sit by the water and think about the version of my life I thought I was living, and the version I'm building now. Slower, quieter, and built entirely on ground I can trust. My grandfather was right about rivers, but he also used to say this: still water isn't always weak. Sometimes it's just waiting to show you how deep it goes. I think I finally understand what he meant.
Sometimes justice doesn't always come loud. Sometimes in a manila envelope, a new look, and a silence they will never forget. Goodbye, Sandra. Follow for more stories.